Hi everyone, welcome to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be making a Tunisian crochet hooded cowl. Let's get started. So this is going to be the Tunisian crochet stitch we're going to be working on today. It does curl up here at the top or at the ends, but I'll show you how to take care of that when we're done. Our edging is going to be a little bit different than a lot of the crochet that you might be used to, but we'll talk more about that as we get there. So let me clear up this piece and I'm just going to show you how to get started. You're going to need 2 skeins of Caron Simply Soft Tweeds, and this is a size 4 yarn, and it's important to look at the size of your yarn because it's going to determine what size hook you need. So typically you want to go about 2 sizes bigger, so size 4 yarn you'd want to do maybe a 6 at least. I'm going to be using an 8mm, and this is specifically a Tunisian crochet hook. I got this in Amazon and it came with a set of multiple ones. I think there's like 10 of them in there, and this is for blankets, so that's why it's super long. But there are other hooks, they look like knitting needles, but they have a crochet hook at the end. You can find those at any craft store. So let's get started here. I'm going to be starting with a slip knot. So to make this slip knot, we're going to wrap the yarn around 2 of our fingers, and we're going to hold that bottom part, insert our hook through that loop, grab some yarn and pull it through the loop. And now we just tighten it up, and we tighten it up by pulling on the 2 ends. Now when you're working on Tunisian crochet, you really want to keep a loose tension, so don't tighten it too much. So to move on to our chain, we're going to just pinch this bottom knot. So there we go. Pinch the bottom knot and then we yarn over. So to do that slowly, I'm just going to wrap the yarn around my hook and then just pull it through that little loop. So that is a chain. So for this project and with this specific size hook, I'm going to be making a chain of 60. So that's going to make a nice wide, I think it's about 15 inches wide is what my cowl is going to be at the end. If you want it a little bit wider, I would go up to maybe about a 70, and that'll make it nice and wide. So now to start with Tunisian crochet, you're just going to be holding on to the edge of your work on your hook for a little bit. So these edges, as you can see, are not that pretty, and that's because I crocheted it right into the stitch. So I'll show you how to do it differently in case you decide that you want to sew your project together. I'm going to crochet it together, so it's not going to make too much of a difference. But if you do want a nice clean edge, and you can do this for any of your crochet work, you're just going to have to flip your chain to the side, and then on the side view here you can see these little bumps. This is the back of the stitch. This is where you can crochet into, and it'll make a nice clean edge every time, no matter what crochet work you're doing. So to do that, just insert your hook. It's going to be the next stitch from your hook. So it's not the one right next to it, it's the second one from your hook. Insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, and keep the loop on your hook. So just pull through one loop. So let's do it again. You go into this little back bump. So insert our hook, yarn over, and pull through that one loop. And then keep your loop on your hook. So we're going to do this in every single chain every single stitch of our chain. And I'm just going to keep chaining these, and it's probably a good time to tell you to keep your tension slack. You don't want to have really tight tension when you're working on Tunisian crochet because it's only going to curl up your work even more. So it already curls up and it's just going to double the curling factor. So we're still going to have to block it once we're done with our work, but you don't want to have to make more work for yourself. So I'm reaching the end, so this is my last stitch. And this one's a little difficult to see, so you can just go into any of the stitches. And there we go. So this is our first row. Now imagine we did this for, 60 stitches. So for our next row, like in all crochet work, you have to chain 1. So to chain 1 when you're working in Tunisian, you yarn over and pull through 1 loop. So that's our chain 1, if you will. So for the rest of the stitches, you yarn over and you're going to pull through 2 loops. So yarn over, and we're going to pull through 1 loop, if I can go through, there we go, and then a second loop. So let's do that again. So we're going to yarn over and we're going to go through 2 loops. So it's 1, and 2. And we're just going to keep doing this until we get to the end of the row. Last 2 stitches are going to be handled in much the same way as all our other stitches, in that we just yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. And that is how we finish our very first row. So for our next row, we're going to be working on all of the vertical stitches. So these are the vertical stitches. We got this one and this next one, this one. Those are the ones we're going to be working into. This first one we skip because this loop on our hook counts as a stitch. So insert your hook into that first vertical post, and it's just the front loop of it. Yarn over and pull through, and you're going to keep the loop on your hook, just like you did in the very first row. So insert your hook into the post or the loop, yarn over and pull through the loop. So I'm just going to keep showing you until I get to the end of the row. And this is what we're going to do in every single one of the vertical stitches. So it's just insert your hook into the first loop, because you're going to see both the loops. Just do the first one of that vertical stitch. So let me get some more yarn and I'll keep working on this one. So here's our last one. Okay, so our very last stitch is a little bit different than the rest of the stitches of this row. And that's so that we can keep a nice and even edge. So we're going to be working into these funky looking stitches right here. But you see this little gap right here? That's the space right next to it. So we've got these 2 chains, and we're going to be working on the bottom chain. It does get easier to see, I promise. So the one that's closest to our initial chain, we're going to go behind those 2 stitches. So it takes a little bit to get the hook through sometimes, but there we go. I got the hook through, and that's through the both loops of that bottom chain. And I'm just going to pull my loop through and keep it on my hook like I did all my other stitches. So it's just that end, it's just where you insert your hook that makes a difference here. So to start the row again, we just yarn over and pull through 1 loop, and then we can continue the row. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we just finish out the row the same way we did 2 rows ago. So I'll work this one quickly and get to the end. And there we go. That is our next row. So I'm going to show you this row one more time. So we're going to go into the second vertical loop. So skip the very first one and go into the second one. Pull your yarn nice and tight to keep your edges clean. So insert your hook, yarn over, and keep the loop on your hook. Go into the next vertical stitch. Insert your hook, yarn over, and pull it through. Keep the loop on your hook. So we're going to keep working on this one. And when we get to the end, hopefully it'll be a little easier for you to see what I mean with that end stitch. Alright, so if you look here at the bottom of the stitch, there's this little, I guess, knot. If you can see it, it's like a little triangle right here. That is the stitch we're going to be going into, this bottom one. So there's that chain on top, but we want the bottom one. So go into, or you're going to insert your hook behind that little triangle. So there's the first loop, and there is the second one. And that's where we want to insert our hook to finish the row. If you can hear someone crunching in the background, sorry, it's my 3-year-old. She's eating an apple and hanging out with me. So let me grab my work and show you what I mean with the edges. So I'm going to have to zoom out, I think, here. Let me find my space and zoom out. There we go. So I don't know if it's incredibly noticeable. It is in person, but this little section right here, I went into that top stitch. So the little stitch that was above the triangle. So this one up here. So instead of going into the bottom one. And in this section up here, I went into that bottom stitch, which is that bottom triangle I was showing you. So it just looks a little bit cleaner. At least in my opinion. You can go ahead and choose whichever stitch you prefer, but I choose the little bottom triangle just because it makes it nice and clean. Alright, so let's finish this and just yarn over and pull through 1 loop and finish the row. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and this is the last row I'm working with you. You're just going to keep working this in this same way. So it's just repeat those 2 rows until you get to the length that you want for your cowl. I made a total of 35.5 inches. So I did many, I didn't even count the rows. So I just kept working on this until it reached about 35 inches plus the end. So yeah, it's what gave me 35.5. So yeah, just keep working on this and I will see you when we're done. So I finished working on about 35 inches worth of Tunisian crochet for this cowl. So we are just going to bind off now. And binding off is doing that last row in Tunisian crochet, and that is because you don't just remove your hook and you're done. You got to give it one last finishing row. So for that, I'm just going to use a single crochet into the stitch. So see these little spaces right here? That's going to be my stitch, and that is where I'm going to insert my hook to make my single crochets. Now these look a little big, and if you want that to be smaller because you're going to sew your cowl closed, then make another row in a smaller crochet hook. So go down to about a 6 and then do another row so it's a nice and small space. So what I've just done is I just insert my hook and I'm just going to make a single crochet. So again, insert hook, yarn over, and I'm going to make a single crochet. So one more time, insert hook, yarn over, single crochet. So I'm just going to single crochet in every one of the stitches until I get to the end of the row. And as you can see, I'm not holding any more loops on my hook. It's just, you can use a regular crochet hook too if it makes you happy for this part. But it's just the last row, and that's so that you have a nice and clean finish. My last stitch of the row, and I'm just going to go into this little bottom triangle stitch, which is the same thing we've done at the end of every other row. And that way I can close off my, I guess my bind off row? I'm not sure what you would call it. The very last row. So let me go grab my scissors, and we're just going to cut our yarn and weave in our ends. So there we go. Give it a nice long tail so that we can weave that in. Just pull out our hook and that thread. And I'm going to use a tapestry needle. You can use whatever needle you prefer, a yarn needle or any needle that fits the yarn that you're using. So I'll just get that threaded and we're going to weave in our end. So to weave in the end, I'm just going to go in and stitch into the nearest stitch I can find. And I typically like to work in a bit of a square pattern. I think if you've watched any of my videos, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, but I usually sew everything in kind of a square stitch just to keep my thread from becoming unraveled and then unraveling all of my work. So I just imagine a square on my work and then just do a stitch going in every one of the 4 directions. So I've finished weaving in my ends and I've hidden the little tail, and now we're going to move on to blocking. So what blocking is going to do is it's going to eliminate the curl that we have here at the top. So see this bit? Yeah, we're going to take care of that with blocking. So you can use, there's these little blocking things you can use. You can get them at like Joann's or Michael's or any of the craft stores. I don't have them. I just use a towel. So I'm just going to set both of my towels. So I use 2 beach towels just so I have a nice thick surface to work on. And here, let me show you. There we go. See? You can use more if you need to. I'm happy with 2. And I'm going to use just a box of pins. So I have a bunch of sewing pins because I also sew. So just get a whole bunch of pins and let's get started. So for this, I'm just fast forwarding through all of this and doing the voiceover. So don't be surprised if it doesn't exactly match. But you're going to want to stretch out your work, and blocking is the perfect time to clean out any imperfections that you have in the sizing. So if there's 1 or 2 rows that you used a little more tension and it kind of curls in at the sides, or it's a little narrower, blocking is the perfect time for you to fix that. So if you've never done any kind of blocking before, sit tight. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about blocking. If you are familiar with blocking, you can go ahead and skip this whole bit. Basically anything that in the background has this purple towel I'm going to be talking about blocking. So if you don't want to hear me talk for a long time, go ahead and skip past all of the stuff that's got the purple background. Okay, so for those that have no idea what blocking is when you use either steam or just a wet, like your wet project, and you're going to shape it. So blocking is essentially just shaping your project. So in this case, I'm using steam blocking, but if I were to be using just like wet blocking, I would wet my work. You could just, light water, cold, warm, whatever it is that's specific to the yarn that you're using. So read your yarn label, and to just wet your work, lay it out on a flat on a flat surface. I usually just use a towel kind of like this. I don't often pin it when I'm using wet blocking. I just kind of lay it out and then just move it however I need to and just check on it a few times a day. I'll leave it out, 2 or 3 days, however long I can until my project completely dries, and you're done. It's blocked. But when I'm working with Tunisian crochet, I do use steam blocking and I pin it down. So that helps me keep my work nice and neat. And as I pass the iron over my work, it keeps my work from curling back up. So something important to know about steam blocking is that I am not, or I guess don't put your iron directly on your work. You're using the steam, not the actual iron. So don't iron your work, especially because if you are using any kind of synthetic fiber yarn, you could ruin your work. It might melt your yarn. So read your yarn label. Make sure that you know what the heat tolerance is on the yarn that you're using. For this one, if you're using the same yarn as I am, you can steam block it a little bit closer. So when you hold the iron above your work, I usually go about maybe an inch, inch and a half is how high I hold the iron to my work. So that way I'm not touching it, but I'm pretty close to it. And that way I'll just let the steam pass over my work, and then I just move it around. So you can see me just steaming everything, and then I kind of pat it down, and I'm just arranging my work the way I want it to look in the end. So the edges, which I thought I had recorded, but I guess when I did the editing, I cut off the ends. So at the end of the work, you know how it was really curled up? I'm doing the same thing that I was doing here in the middle. So I just pass the iron over the work and then pat it down. Be sure to not pat it down right away because it will be hot. So wait just a second and then pat it down. It just doesn't look like I'm waiting because I'm fast forwarding through everything. But steam it, give it a second, and then pat it down where you need to uncurl it and arrange your work the way you want it to look. So those are the basics of blocking. I hope I didn't leave you with more questions than what you had before you started this project. But if you do have questions, leave it in the comment section below. I'll do the best I can to answer them. If I get a lot of questions about it, maybe I'll make a tutorial about blocking and I'll go more into detail about it, and maybe actually show you the different types of blocking. But here you see me removing the pins, and you can just remove them after you're done working on it. You don't have to wait for a long time. As soon as your project has cooled down, just remove your pins. And then what I do is I just go around the edges again with my iron, all little pieces that I couldn't steam because the pin was in the way. I just go over those real quick with my iron on the steam setting and then just pat those down. So the edges specifically are a section that I go over a couple more times without the pins in it, because that way I can just kind of push it down and lay it flat, whereas I couldn't do that because the pins were in the way and my hand couldn't press down on the work completely. Finished blocking all of my work. So see, the edges are nice and uncurled, and I'm going to fold it inside out because I want to sew, well in this case I'm going to crochet my work shut. So I want all the stitching to be on the inside of the cowl. So I'm going to use a hook. You can use any hook. I think this one's an F size, but any hook will work. If you're going to sew it, thread your needle with a yarn or whatever it is you want to do, line up your edges and sew it closed. I'm going to be crocheting it, so that's what I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to insert my hook into both sides of the work and pull my yarn through. And then I'm just going to make a slip stitch real quick. And there we go. Now I can get started. So for every one of these stitches, I'm going through both sides of the work because I am sewing it together. So I guess crocheting it together to be more specific. But I just insert my hook, pull the yarn through. So there we go. Just pull it through the stitch, and then I'm just gonna single crochet. So don't space out your work too much, or don't space out your single crochets too much, because the bigger the gap between your stitches is just going to be a gap in your work, and it'll show when you flip your work right side out. So every couple of stitches, just insert your hook and make a single crochet, and that's going to sew both of your edges shut. So I've made a single crochet every couple stitches all the way down the row, and I am on my last single crochet and I am done. I'll be done single crocheting my cowl closed. So let me just grab my scissors and I'll cut a big tail end of yarn so that I can weave it in. Here we go. Nice big tail. And I'll just pull the yarn out. And I'm just going to give it a quick tie here so that I can flip the work right side out and show you what the stitching looks like. This is for personal use, so I'm not being very careful with the seam. If you want it to be a magnificent seam and you want it to look really nice, then I recommend you maybe sew it shut, or you be very careful with your single crochets. I wasn't. Like I said, it's for personal use. So it didn't matter to me too much if it was kind of a bulky seam. I'm okay with it. That's up to you though. You can use whatever method you prefer. But that's it. Now that it's all stitched up closed, I'm just going to go through, weave in all of my ends, and you're done. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them down in the comments section below. If you want to see more of my crochet work, I am on Instagram, and you can follow me. I'm at mode.bespoke. For patterns or ideas, I do have a blog, and I do have all of my patterns on there are free. I do have printable patterns that you can buy if you want to. Otherwise, they are all on there for free. And that is modebespoke.blogspot.com. The link is in the description below. Subscribe to my channel if this is the kind of stuff you like to do and you like to see crochet patterns and learn about all things crochet. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.